This is an interview with Professor Alfred de Zayas. Alfred de Zayas is an American and Swiss citizen, studied law and history at Harvard, practiced commercial law in New York and Florida, has been professor of law at numerous universities in the US, Canada and Switzerland. An expert in the field of human rights, he served as secretary of the UN Human Rights Committee and chief of the Petitions Department at the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. Since 2012, he has been the UN independent expert on the promotion of a democratic and equitable international order, appointed by the United Nations Human Rights Council, and has presented 13 thematic reports to the Human Rights Council and General Assembly. I would like to make it clear that we are neither Assad regime apologetics nor anti-Americans. This interview, and I apply a quote from Alfred's blog site, is intended to further an informal exchange of views in the democratic spirit of freedom of opinion and respect for the opinions of others. Professor, after the US-led attack in Syria, the American president said that it was a response, the direct result of Russia's failure to keep its promise from 2013 that they would guarantee the elimination of Syria chemical weapons. So was the coalition airstrike on April 14th legal? And if so, why?
Well, Christian, that's nonsense, like so much that we hear these days. As you know, there's fake news, but there's also fake law. And he is assuming that people think that the United States has legitimacy, that the United States is the world policeman and can respond and can retaliate against the violation or supposed violation of international law by another country. Well, that's not the case. What does violate international law, what is indeed illegal, is an unprovoked attack on a sovereign country. Now, the use of force is regulated by the United Nations Charter. The Charter is the world constitution, and the Charter prevails over all other agreements. Article 2, paragraph 4 prohibits the use of force. There are only two exceptions: self-defense, and if the Security Council adopts a resolution authorizing the limited and proportional use of force. That's not the case here. So what we have here is the crime of aggression for purposes of the Statute of Rome, for purposes of the Kampala definition of the crime of aggression, so that here not only Trump, but also Theresa May and also Macron have actually given reason for the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to start an investigation.
Let me ask you this. In case of a Syrian civil war, does the US or anyone have the legality to intervene? Are there any obligations for the international community to intervene on a civil war, for example?
Well, wait a minute. There is a principle of international law, and which is actually customary international law, which is the principle of non-intervention. And you can only intervene and use force with the authority that the Security Council may or may not give. So what I just mentioned about fake law, here there is a nebulous area, we call it soft law. They're trying to invoke a, shall we say, a new doctrine that they have concocted, which is the doctrine of responsibility to protect, which, by the way, was pretty much trounced in the General Assembly in July 2009, when there was a big debate on R2P, and then the President of the General Assembly set out 4 benchmark questions that had to be answered if humanitarian intervention could occur with the approval of the Security Council. But when they invoke humanitarian intervention, they think that they are actually replacing or circumventing Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the UN Charter, which prohibits the use of force. And that is not the case. You cannot circumvent what is called jus cogens, which is peremptory international law. And certainly not by invoking a principle that is not universally agreed upon, that is not laid down in a treaty. This is only laid down in a resolution of the General Assembly. So this is deliberate misinformation of the public or confusing the public. It's a red herring.
Now, is there any right for a country to help another country in case of war? Are there legal grounds for that?
There is customary international law that the legitimate government of a sovereign country can, in case of a civil war, ask a third state for assistance. In principle, neutrality, and all states are called upon to non-intervention and non-interference. They ought to remain neutral, and if the legitimate government that has been elected, and it's the government that is represented in the United Nations, and the government represented in the United Nations is the government of Bashar al-Assad. If that government asks assistance, then that assistance is legal. Everybody else that goes in, and that means the United States, and that means Saudi Arabia, etc., is there illegally. And you know, if there is an international wrongful act, and this is an international wrongful act, there's also civil liability and there is penal liability. And that, of course, has to go to the International Court of Justice if you have a contentious case, and to the International Criminal Court for the penal law aspects thereof.
So even if there were serious human rights violations, that would not justify a military intervention by a third party in another country?
Not a unilateral one. We live in a world where the letter and spirit of the UN Charter obliges all states, members of the United Nations, to multilateralism. And Article 2, Paragraph 3 obliges everybody to settle international disputes in a peaceful manner. So no one can take it upon himself to say, unilaterally, I am going to solve this problem. I'm going to go and impose regime change. That entails the crime of aggression. You can refer to General Assembly Resolution 3314 that defines aggression. You can refer to Resolution 2625 that sets out the principles of friendly relations among nations.
Professor, we still don't have solid evidence of the suspected chemical attack in Douma in April of this year, 2018. As the OPCW, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons mission, is still blocked from Douma. What should be the legal procedure here? How do these people can start with their work? And
well, the Syrian government has invited them. But of course, the Syrian government is also responsible for their safety. Until the safety can be guaranteed, we'll have to wait. But obviously, in any country where there is a civil war situation, you have dangers. That was the case in Iraq after the assault by the Coalition of the Willing back in 2003. And my boss, I was a staff member at the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Sergio Vieira de Mello, and 21 colleagues were killed in an attack by terrorists on the UN compound in Baghdad. So you don't want to have the inspectors killed. Now, there were inspectors in Baghdad back in 2003. You may recall Hans Blix and the head of the International Agency for Nuclear Weapons, Mohammed El-Baradei, and they carried out also investigations, which of course led to the conclusion that there were no weapons of mass destruction there. So even this determination that there were no such weapons of mass destruction did not stop the United States and the Coalition of the Willing from devastating Iraq, what I would call the greatest breach of international law and international order since the Nuremberg trials, actually a revolt against the rule of law, a revolt against international law, a revolt of 43 countries that decided to make the United Nations irrelevant. I mean, we don't need the United Nations. We can go in there and impose regime change on the Iraqi people unilaterally. So there again, that is the danger that I see in Syria. It is actually in a series of such challenges to the United Nations and challenges to international order, meaning the unilateral bombardment of the then Federal Republic of Yugoslavia in 1999 without any approval of the Security Council, the assault on Iraq in 2003, the assault on Libya in 2011, and now there's a danger of military action against Venezuela. And what does Iraq, Libya, and Venezuela have in common? Oil. And Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world. So I am concerned that if there is impunity, if in the past the United States got away with it in Iraq and in Libya, and no one has been held to account, that they might see that as an invitation to march into Venezuela and impose regime change by force.
And talking about this, nearly all the existing Syrian oil reserves, estimated around 2.5 billion barrels, are located in the area currently occupied by the US government.
And that is certainly not a coincidence, Christian. I mean, the United States intends to steal it, as in the case of Iraq. The United States intends to determine who is going to be making money with that oil, because it's not just the one-time payment once you extract it, but it's everything that goes with it. It is the refining, it is the transportation, etc. There are billions of dollars to be made. But you know, what makes the most money in the world is not oil, it's the arms trade. And that's why the military-industrial complex, President Dwight D. Eisenhower warned the American people about the danger to America's democracy posed by the military-industrial complex. It is they that are running the country. It is they that are calling the shots. They want war, because the only way the military-industrial complex makes money is if they produce weapons and missiles and ships, and then you send them to war, you get them destroyed, and then you can produce some more, sell some more, and make a profit. And since it's all national security, there's no transparency. The level of corruption in the military-industrial complex is astronomical, is breathtaking. But again, it has the cover of national security. So as long as the merchants of death are making money, we're going to have wars.
So you're saying that President Trump is almost pushed or sort of puppet?
Oh, certainly. I mean, that was not only him. Obama was the same. And Clinton was the same. I don't think that Clinton had an interest, a personal interest in Kosovo, a personal interest in changing the territorial integrity of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. I mean, Clinton was a pragmatist, an opportunist. He was never an ideologue. So it's not Clinton who was behind Rambouillet, who was behind the attack in 1999 on Yugoslavia. And it certainly was not George W. Bush, but it was his staff of neoconservatives, Dick Cheney and Richard Pearl and Wolfowitz, etc., who pushed for the war against Iraq. And actually, we know, because a lot of material has become available, documents have become declassified, there have been hearings in the US Congress, there have been hearings in the British Parliament, and we know that the decision to, quote, take out Saddam Hussein was already taken in 2001. And not only was the United States going to take out Iraq, it was going to take out Libya. It was on the plan. It was going to take out Syria. It was going to take out Iran. So there is a plan to maintain United States hegemony in the Middle East and not allow sovereign states to determine their own policy. So the idea of self-determination of the Kurds, for instance, in Iraq, or in Turkey, or in Syria, that's something that the United States has no interest in. The United States has interest in business, in making money, and in keeping chaos, what you might call controlled chaos, in the area.
Do you think, as you called it, there's a plan to take out President Assad?
I don't doubt it. Of course, I haven't seen any documents to that effect, but
it's a possibility.
Of course. There are a number of ways of doing that. The United States has had for quite a while a policy of targeted assassination. So does Israel. I mean, they do not respect their respective constitutions, because the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of Israel, require due process. I mean, you cannot just go up and just shoot one person. If you want to arrest the person and you want to bring him to trial, that's what you have to do. But you're not supposed to go and simply take him out. And that is what has happened more and more, with total impunity. But not only with impunity, with the connivance, with the complicity of the media. because the media, which is supposed to be the watchdog of democracy, the media is not doing its job. The media is pulling the rope. The media is going along with whatever London wants to do, or whatever Paris wants to do, or Washington wants to do, instead of saying you are committing the crime of aggression, and you are responsible for the war crimes and the crimes against humanity that will follow that aggression. And in 2003, after the devastation of Iraq, there were the scandals of collateral murder. You remember that from Assange and his WikiLeaks film. And you have the scandals of torture in Abu Ghraib, and of course torture in Guantanamo, etc. Nobody has been held to account. And those who should be before the International Criminal Court are these big criminals. I think the International Criminal Court has lost whatever credibility it had at the beginning, because it has only focused on secondary figures and has not taken up those things that are really dangerous to humanity, and those people who have actually caused millions of deaths through aggressive war.